World War II marked a significant change in the way of warfare. Not only in terms of new strategies but also due to the tremendous advances in weaponry that occurred during that time. An emblematic case takes us to the skies of the United States, as one of the most formidable aircraft created by Washington during the 20th century was born and consolidated during the conflict, the lethal Douglas A-26 Invader. Thanks to its outstanding performance, this night attack and bombing aircraft extended its operability far beyond the world conflict and became part of the US forces in scenarios such as Korea and Vietnam. In this new video from Military Aviation, we aim to explore the history and the most astonishing features of one of the longest-serving aircraft in the USAF. Versatile, with 8 powerful machine guns in its nose and a ton of bombs ready to devastate the enemy, that was the A-26 Invader. The history of this aircraft takes us back to the early years of World War II. Before the United States entered the conflict, Washington authorities closely monitored the actions of Nazi Germany and became interested in constructing an aircraft with a triple function, a kind of combination of night fighter, bomber, and air-to-surface attack. Up to that point, no company had worked on such an ambitious project, but in 1940, the Douglas Company accepted the challenge despite the difficulties involved in combining all these features into one aircraft. The project was handed over to a team of engineers, including Edward Heinemann, Robert Donovan, and Red Smith, who, after hard work, presented the XA-26 prototype, which successfully completed its first flight on July 10, 1942. That design resulted in a fast aircraft capable of carrying double the specified bomb load and could be equipped with a wide range of weapons, making it a formidable ground attack aircraft. This led the U.S. Air Force to immediately approve it for mass production under the name A-26 Invader. Thus, a mid-wing, twin-engine bomber was born, measuring 15 meters in length and over 20 in wingspan. Its empty weight was 10,300 kilograms but could take off with a maximum of 15,900. It achieved this with its power plant consisting of 2 Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial piston engines, which also gave it unmatched performance. The Invader could reach speeds of 570 kilometers per hour, with a climb rate of 6.4 meters per second and a ceiling of 6,700 meters. Additionally, it had a combat range of 2,300 kilometers. A noteworthy detail among the A-26's features was its armament, both for attack and defense. It was the American aircraft with the greatest firepower, starting with its distinctive nose full of 12.7mm Browning M2 machine guns. While the front of the aircraft carried 8, another 4 were divided between the ventral and dorsal turrets. A total of 12 machine guns. And if the .50 caliber was not enough, the Invader was ready to wreak havoc with its ability to carry 2,800 kilograms of bombs, of which 1,800 were accommodated in the bomb bay, and the remaining ton under the wing's attachment points, ready to destroy the enemy. As a last resort, the aircraft could also carry up to 10 HVR 127mm rockets mounted on underwing pylons. The A-26 also demonstrated other improvements over its predecessors. For example, unlike the A-20 Havoc, which had slow and somewhat ineffective flaps, the Invader had double-slotted flaps that moved backward and downward, creating greater lift during takeoff and landing. This way, a more agile, faster, and heavily armed aircraft became the Allies' new trump card. Nevertheless, its involvement in the conflict was delayed. Until the end of 1944, the A-26 attack bombers had no opportunity to enter World War II. Their baptism of fire took place through a series of sorties over the German army columns during the Battle of the Bulge, before clearing the way for U.S. forces from the Ruhr to the Elbe River in the heart of Germany. Simultaneously, in the Pacific Theater, invaders bombed targets in the Japanese Empire in Southeast Asia, especially in the Manokwari sector of New Guinea. There were also units of the aircraft in Italy to provide tactical support to the Allies during the Po River Offensive, which culminated in the conquest of Milan and the defeat of the Republic of Salo. However, not everything was glory for the aircraft during World War II. Despite its immense qualities, the A-26 had to learn some lessons the hard way. Although its speed was greater than that of other bombers, the Invader was not entirely suitable for low-level flight missions. This was discovered the hard way during an operation in January 1945. 6 A-26s were sent to destroy a target in Belgium. They split into groups of 2 and dropped their bombs on vehicles to obstruct the path to a city. They then returned to strafe their targets again but encountered a devastating ground fire, and 5 of the 6 planes were shot down by anti-aircraft action. However, despite this incident, the balance of this powerful aircraft in World War II was extremely positive. That's why, when the Korean War broke out between 1950 and 1953, the US Air Force sent several squadrons of A-26 Invaders to the Far East, contributing significantly to liberating South Korea from Busan to Seoul. In that conflict, these twin-engine aircraft based in Japan achieved significant successes such as leveling Pyongyang Airport in North Korea and bombing distant targets on the Yalu River and even in the People's Republic of China after the Chinese army launched an offensive toward the 38th parallel. Among the records achieved by the A-26 during this conflict were 15,000 operational sorties in which they destroyed 38,500 vehicles, 406 locomotives, and 3,700 railcars, at the cost of the lives of 85 of their pilots. The Indochina War between 1950 and 1954 was another major conflict where invaders distinguished themselves, this time in service to France. There, they participated in bombing raids against Vietnamese troops besieging the airfield defended by paratroopers and volunteers of the French Foreign Legion during the epic Battle of Dien Bien Phu. A decade later, in 1961, a large number of A-26s piloted by Cuban exiles took part in the Bay of Pigs invasion, which unsuccessfully sought to overthrow the communist regime of Commander Fidel Castro. The aircraft continued to write its history in the following years in the service of different countries until 1968 when it returned to the spotlight among U.S. forces. With the onset of the Vietnam War, A-26 Invaders were secretly stationed in Thailand and sold to South Vietnam to bomb targets of their northern rivals. Many of the planes were also piloted by American aviators, who were important allies during the conflict. Despite the generally positive role of the A-26 in the fight against the North Vietnamese army, one of the aircraft suffered a mid-air explosion, forcing a series of technical upgrades in the remaining units. Once the mechanical issues were resolved, the invaders distinguished themselves by dropping tons of bombs on the Viet Cong guerrillas in both South Vietnam and the Mekong River Delta until the withdrawal of the U.S. military in 1972. After a long journey and more than 2,500 units that brought prestige to an icon of American military aviation, in 1979, Washington officially and permanently retired the A-26 Invader from active military service. Up to that point, after 35 years on the battlefield, this attack bomber had been the nightmare of Germans, Japanese, Italians, North Koreans, Chinese, North Vietnamese, and many more. At the time of its retirement, it went down in history as one of the most devastating tactical aircraft of the late World War II and more than half of the Cold War. As we conclude, we can assert that, undoubtedly, the A-26 lived a surprisingly long and productive operational life, especially considering its origins in a demanding requirement of World War II. It not only positively contributed to that conflict but prolonged its use to fight in wars around the world and for various forces. In any case, the Invader retained many qualities admired by its crews, such as speed, survivability, and offensive firepower. This is how this system endured for decades, leaving its legendary name high in the skies. Now, it's time to bid farewell. Thank you very much for joining us until the end. And stay tuned to our channel to meet again in the next video.